It's a very safe place to live. It's probably the safest place in the world.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner Sharon Sutton.
Today, my guest is David Roberts. David is a co-founder of the Care in Man Isle of Man charity. He's a past president of the Isle of Man Beekeepers Association, a trustee, and also a recipient of Her Majesty the Queen's Monday Money. As well as having an illustrious career in the oil sector, find out how his actions saved us, the Isle of Man government and taxpayers, £2 million approximately a year, and how he and his wife Christine have adopted a son and family in Uganda. This is a fascinating episode and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. So welcome, David, to Island Influences. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
So I wonder if we can go back in time and just find out all about you, where you were born, where you grew up, how you ended up here.
I was a war baby. I was born in the height of the Blitz in Guildford, Surrey, and my father was a very prominent policeman, and my mother was a school teacher, and they met when he was the village policeman and she was the village schoolmistress back in the 1930s.
Oh, how romantic.
And he went on to become head of CID for Surrey, and then retired from there and went on to a long career with MI5, about which I am allowed to tell you nothing.
Ah, okay. So what was he, 006?
Something like that,
So,
yes.
My goodness.
Yes.
Do you know where it took him? I don't suppose you can say, really, can you?
I did get involved personally in the 1960s because they had a number of major spy trials on at that time, and they needed to employ people who were unlikely and totally unknown as observers, and I was employed for quite a few years as an MI5 observer.
Oh, fascinating.
And I was involved in the Portland spy trial and one or two other high-profile trials. You didn't know anything about it at all at the time. All you knew was that you had to watch for this car or that person and report on what they were doing.
Okay. That sounds amazing. You were born in Guildford in Surrey.
I was.
Yeah. And so you went to school there, did you? And
I went to the Guildford Royal Grammar School and came out with virtually no qualifications at all. I got all my qualifications the hard way at evening classes and night school and courses that I was put through by my employer.
Okay.
I went almost straight away to work for Shell Mex and BP, which was the marketing company for Shell and BP in the UK at the time.
Gosh.
And I started on a salary of less than £5 a week, working in London. And I progressed over 30 years. And they put me through all sorts of training courses. I did my Chartered Institute of Marketing exams and various other qualifications, which they paid for along the way, which was great.
That sounds like a really good career path. What was it about school that you found that you didn't particularly take to it?
Oh, school. Well, all the grammar schools around that time took in 60. 2 classes of 30, and I was a bulge year, so they had to take 90 in, and they didn't actually want the extra 30, and they allocated the 30 into the various streams on the first day of school, and they did this by inviting you to write an English essay. Well, my fountain pen broke, and I put my hand up to say, please could I have another? Put your hand down, boy, get on. But my pen is, no, just carry on. So I could write nothing.
Oh, goodness.
So I got put in the C stream, which was not entirely surprising.
A bit unfair.
And they didn't want the C stream.
Right.
They made it quite clear all the way through. Instead of learning French, we learnt Spanish. We got the PE teacher for mathematics because they hadn't got anybody else to teach us maths. And we had a thoroughly rough deal. So Guildford Grammar School is not high in my esteem.
No, what a shame. So what sort of attracted you to go to work for BP?
I had a lifelong passion and interest in motor cars, and I wanted to do something with motor cars.
Right,
and to get into the fuel side of the business seemed to be a good way in.
Indeed.
I never actually had anything to do with motor cars when I worked for Shell, but that was why I headed in that direction.
Okay, so it was the Shell, not BP, it was Shell.
It was Shell Mex and BP.
Right, okay.
From 1934 until 1976, Shell and BP had a joint marketing company in the UK called Shell Mex and BP.
Right.
It actually split in 1976, which was the biggest demerger that's ever taken place in commercial history. And they separated, and 40% of everything went to BP and 60% of everything went to Shell, including the staff.
Right.
And I went the Shell way.
Okay, there we are. Well, thanks very much for that. So whereabouts in the world did that take you?
Only UK and Europe, no further. In fact, it was virtually all the UK. I was involved on the marketing side in a whole variety of different activities. I ran a cavity wall insulation company for Shell.
Gosh.
I marketed pink paraffin under the Aladdin brand for Shell. I marketed heavy fuel oil to heavy industry, GKN, Imperial Metal Industries, British Leyland, and all these companies we sold heavy fuel oil to.
Yeah.
So I did a whole variety of different things.
Yeah, all names and brands that have disappeared, but one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yes.
It shows how the world's changed, I suppose.
Yes.
So what other qualifications did you do along the way that led you to move career?
I did various qualifications in the oil business, oil-specific qualifications, and I did the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I did a higher national diploma in business and commerce. I did qualifications in health and safety and qualifications in HR. At one point I decided teaching was going to be my thing, so I got a teaching qualification. So I was qualified to teach adults, not school teaching, but adults. So,
sure. Okay, and at what sort of point did you get married, have children? Where did that occur along the way?
I met my wife. We were both working for Shell Mex and BP. She was my typist in the industrial lubricants department.
Right.
She was 15 when I first met her, and we got married at a time when you still had to get parents' consent if you got married under 21.
Gosh.
People have forgotten about that. It's long since gone. But yes, you had to get married. You had to have parents' consent to get married. Before we got married, I decided to spread my wings a bit, and I wanted to do something a bit different. So I went off to Africa and worked for voluntary service overseas.
Okay.
In East Africa, and I was working for the Ministry of Agriculture there, recruiting African students to work in agriculture.
Yes.
They had a big problem. The school leavers didn't want to work in agriculture because it was low status value. It was very infra-dig. The only way you could get them to come into agriculture was to offer them an overseas training course.
Okay.
So I spent my time going around the embassies, the consulates, the charities, trying to beg funds for sponsored overseas training courses.
Gosh, how did that go?
Well, it went quite well. I sent 15 Tanzanians to Russia to become vets.
Wow.
And the course was 13 years.
It's slightly worse than it even is here, yeah.
They'll just about be back by now, I should think.
Oh, my God. Gosh, that's something else, isn't it? At what age did you get married then, if it's not a rude question?
I was 24 and Christine was 19.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you had family.
We had a girl and a boy. Our son sadly died of leukemia at 11 years old.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We now have 3 grandsons.
Yes.
We also have an adopted African son and 3 African grandchildren.
Oh, that's amazing. Was it your job that led you to come and live here?
Yes. Shell Mex and BP had finished by that time, and it was Shell Marketing, and they asked me to come over to the Isle of Man to sort out their operation over here. They worked through a distributor over here called Manx Petroleums, who still exist, who owned privately owned, but they got themselves into a very considerable sort of a mess, and they needed somebody to come and sort them out. So I was sent over to do it. That took about 2 years. And whilst they promised me it would be a 5-year posting, it came to an end because Manx Petroleum didn't actually want my presence any longer.
I see.
And Shell tried to take me back to work in London. I said, no, really, I'm not going to go back and work in London. I love the Isle of Man. I want to stay here.
So you moved the family here?
Yeah, including mother-in-law.
Gosh.
So they said, well, there's nothing we can do for you. There's no job for you there. We'll have to make you redundant. So I said, fine, good idea.
Yes.
So they made me redundant. I saw an opportunity. The island had been treated very badly by Shell. They'd been profit-taking to the extreme for many years because there was no competition at all. Mm-hmm. And everybody said there'll never be any competition on the Isle of Man because Shell own the harbour facilities, they own the depot on Battery Pier in Douglas, and there's no way for a competitor to come in.
Okay, and is that still the case?
That is not still the case. Having lived and worked here, I realised that you could actually bring small coastal tankers into Peel Harbour. So I went round to various companies and said, look, would you be interested in setting up on the Isle of Man? I tried BP and one or two others, and Total, the French company, said, yeah, great. Yeah, we'd like to do that. We're big in the Channel Islands. We understand islands. If you work for us, we will set up on the Isle of Man. So we built a depot at Peel, which took a couple of years. We laid a pipeline along the breakwater out to the castle. We never thought we'd ever get planning permission to do it, but we did.
Wow.
And we started bringing fuel in to the storage depot at Peel and marketing it on the Isle of Man. Shell were not best pleased about this.
I bet they weren't.
The highly profitable bit of their business on the island had been supplying fuel oil to the power station, because at that time all the island's electricity was oil generated.
Yes.
There was no gas generation. And the year before there was any competition, the Manx Electricity Authority paid something like £7 million for their generating fuel. A year later, after we started competing with Shell and bringing fuel into Peel, they paid something less than £5 million.
That's a decent reduction.
So
Thank you.
that was a significant contribution, which is still ongoing to this day in many ways to the Manx economy. Because it did make a big difference, because the price of electricity was sky high, because Shell were overcharging and over-profiteering, and they were very inefficient. And they were just taking advantage of their monopoly situation, and it needed competition. One of the problems with island economies is that they tend to suffer from monopolies, because the market isn't big enough to sustain two suppliers, and yet if you have only one, they take advantage of their monopoly position and become very inefficient because they have no incentive to be efficient. They let their costs get out of control, and it goes all over the place. There's still examples of that around today where the island is suffering from monopoly situations.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's a fascinating story, David. I had no idea, and I'm sure most of the people listening to this would have had no idea that was the case, and that it was your idea that really reduced the costs of that to the government. I mean, most of us would more notice the differential at the petrol pump, I'm guessing, so that the price of petrol would have fallen. Okay, so how long did you stay? Because Total, they were here for a while, weren't they? But they left after a few years, I think.
They sold their operation to a distribution company who set it up again under the name of Ellen Van in Fuels. I worked for Total for about 5 years or so. Okay. And then for a whole variety of complex reasons, I decided it was time to retire. Okay. I was in my early 50s, and that lasted about 3 months or so. Yes. And I made the mistake of going away for a few days, came back, and Christine said to me, she said, there's a job in the paper. She said, I've filled in the application for you. You've got an interview next Wednesday. And it was with Douglas Corporation.
Yes, that's when we first met, was when you were working for Douglas Corpy. Yeah.
And I went in as their Chief Administrative Officer and finished up as the Assistant Chief Executive.
Goodness.
And I was doing a variety of jobs, which are now done by about 10 different people. I was doing HR, health and safety,
right,
and all sorts of other things. And now they've split them all up and they've employed a whole legion of staff to do these.
Well, I'm sure it's great value for money.
There's great scope there for change.
Well, there's a new chief exec in, isn't there? So maybe they're going through it with a new broom.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. They've when I first joined them, they had 60-odd white-collar staff and 200 blue-collar staff. And they had the Villa Marina.
Yes.
Which was employed a big number of staff. And they had the Highways Agency for the whole of the road network for Douglas. They lost both of those. They lost the Villa and they lost the Highways Agency. And the number of white-collar staff grew and grew and grew. They used to have 2 people managing the housing department. Now I think they've got about 10.
So during that time, what other things have you done? Because you've become involved. We've met again. The fact that we're at St John's Mill is primarily down to you, I remember.
Well, one of the things that Christine and I did in our very early years on the Isle of Man, we set up a charity. Initially it was called Care in Douglas, and we copied an idea from a town in the UK who'd set up a care charity.
Yes.
The idea was that it was a good neighbour scheme. We would do for anybody who hadn't got a good neighbour what a good neighbour would normally do for them. We'd do shopping, we'd do emergency babysitting, we'd do transport to hospitals. I can even remember painting a ceiling for somebody and clearing a front garden. It gradually developed into a service now which still exists, but its prime function now is transport. This is what people need, particularly elderly people who've had to give up driving.
Yes, of course.
And they don't particularly like the hospital transport because it picks them up very early in the morning and bounces them around the island in a minibus while it picks up 6 more people.
Yeah, sure.
And if you're not feeling very well, that's not what you want.
No.
And then they're very uncertain what time they're going to get taken home again in the afternoon. They may have to wait a long time.
Yeah, sure.
And what we do is we pick people up, we'll put them in a wheelchair if they need it, take them to wherever they're going, we'll sit with them, wait with them, and then take them home again afterwards.
Oh, that's lovely. That's called Care in Man now, isn't it?
It's called Care in Man.
Yeah,
it's called Care in Man.
What made you want to set that up in the first place? What drove that? Was it personal experience? Or?
Yes, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, and there seemed to be a need for something like this on the island.
Yeah.
We now have maybe 80 or 90 volunteers. We're always looking for new ones.
Well, it's a good place to say that on this podcast. In fact, if you give us the details, we can put it in our show notes. And
yeah, thank you.
So people can contact you.
Particularly at the moment, because quite a number of our volunteer drivers are nervous about driving at the moment. So we're short on numbers, but high on demand for services.
Yeah, I can imagine nobody wants to expose themselves inadvertently to COVID, do they really?
No. But we're up and running again, but we're only doing hospitals, dentists, and medical things at the moment. We're not doing things like shopping and hairdressers and stuff like that. We just haven't got the resources to do that.
So many of the shops have been great putting on home delivery services, haven't they? The likes of Robinsons and other shops do, but lots of... Yeah, no, that's great.
But I shouldn't say this, but it is one of the few charities on the island which is not short of money.
Well, that's good to know.
Because the service has been so much appreciated over 30-odd years that people have made bequests.
That's nice.
Which is a great position to be in, actually.
Yeah, isn't it just... So I take it you use those funds to... recompense drivers for time.
We don't make any charge for the service at all. We make it clear there's no charge. We say to people, if you would like to make a donation, then that would be very welcome. And most people do make a donation. That all goes into the central pot, and then the drivers put in a mileage claim for how many miles they've driven each month and get recompensed.
Do you mind me asking? You say no if you want, but was your experience in putting that together, was that anything to do with how you'd found hospital services in the past, or
Not especially. No, it wasn't particularly related to our own experience. Although we'd obviously had very considerable experience of the difficulties of looking after a very sick child in hospital. A hospital that was 40 miles away from home, and there was another child to be looked after as well, and it went on for a very long time.
Were you living here at the time? Or
No.
No, you were in the UK.
No,
Right.
before we came here.
Yeah. That must have been a very difficult time for you.
It was a difficult time, yeah. It was very difficult.
Has that driven this sort of desire? Because I know this isn't the only charity that you are involved with. You've been involved with, is it Scripture Union?
Scripture Union, yes.
Dressing as a monk.
Yes, yes. Scripture Union is one of the charities we have a passion for on the island. They have a base down at Malmore and in Port St Mary, where they all sort of live in community. And one of the activities of Scripture Union is to go into schools to relate or to act out the traditional Bible stories, which the children don't get to hear these days, because virtually none of them have an exposure to Sunday school nowadays.
No, of course.
And there's no other really source of that sort of interaction for them. So we go into 5 different schools, and we go and dress up in all sorts of outfits, and we act out and tell the Bible stories. It all comes from the Lions Storyteller Bible, which is set up by the Bible Society in the UK, and we stick strictly to the script that they give us. We don't depart into anything else at all. So we know we're on safe ground, and we're always made very welcome. We've never had a single comment or adverse comment from a parent or anything. The children love it. They're always pleased to see us.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, that sounds great. And how did you get to meet Andrew? Because he came over here as a student, didn't he?
Andrew is our adopted Ugandan son. We knew his father from a long way back. Originally, the diocese on the Isle of Man, Diocese of Soto and Man, had a link with the Diocese of Mbali in Uganda.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Mbali Diocese split into Mbali North and Mbali South. Well, the diocese went with Mbali North, so the association was Mbali North. But we'd already established a great friendship with Andrew's father, who was a clergyman in Mbali South. So we kept that going. And Andrew's father, whose name was Isaiah, came over to the island on numerous occasions and stayed with us. He brought his wife with him the last time he came, which I think was 1998. And then, sadly, she died HIV positive, which he thinks she picked up from the local hospital with a blood transfusion. Isaiah married again. A few years later, sadly, he died. And he'd had 6 children, only 3 of them surviving. We suspect 3 were HIV, but we don't know. And Andrew was the oldest son. So we looked after Andrew and his 2 sisters, and we funded them through university. And then there was an opportunity for Andrew to come to the island to work with Scripture Union for a year. So after a long battle, we managed to get a visa for him.
I bet.
And he spent a year here on the island with us, which was great.
Yeah, he was a nice young man. I remember meeting him. Yeah.
And then he went back and he got married. He now has 3 young children. We went out to his wedding, which was quite an experience. 3 years ago? Yes, 3 years ago we went to Uganda for his wedding. We were intending to go again this year, but the virus has prevented it, but we might go next year.
Oh, that's marvellous. And I believe there was some... Because another passion of yours is beekeeping, isn't it?
It is.
And aren't you the president of the Isle of Man Beekeepers Association?
Well, I was. I've handed the reins over, I'm very happy to say, to somebody else.
Big gong, actually, isn't it?
It is. Yes, I've been involved with beekeeping for, I can claim, over 70 years, actually.
Goodness me.
Because my godfather gave me as a christening present when I was 12 weeks old 2 hives of bees, which was a pretty unusual christening present.
Yeah.
My father looked after them for me, but he made sure that I got involved at a very young age. So I've been involved with bees and beekeeping for a very long time indeed, long before I came to the Isle of Man. And beekeeping over here is very special. We're very fortunate because we don't have the diseases that they've got in the UK.
The Varroa
mite, which is rampant in the UK and can only be controlled by using chemicals. We have wonderful biodiversity. We have a great mix of things for the bees to forage on, and it's not limited, as it is in some areas of the UK. It's limited by what's grown in that particular area, but over here it's great variety. We have
sure, and we're all not cutting our grass now because you've told us not to.
Wonderful.
We've all got clover growing, and
good.
And even Gardeners World is telling people to not cut their lawns anymore. I noticed.
Good.
Oh, that's the message is getting through.
Good.
Yeah, golly.
So there's a lot of interest, an upsurge of interest in beekeeping on the island. I teach the beginners classes, and 6-7 years ago we might have had 6 or 8 people turn up for the winter classes. Now we get 45 or 50.
That's amazing.
They're not all going to be beekeepers, but they come just because they're interested and they want to learn something about bees.
Somebody taught one of the teachers at the Buchan School, because my son went in the last year.
That's right. I
remember
him.
He acquired a real passion for beekeeping from that, and it's a really amazing opportunity for any young person to get involved with beekeeping.
There's such a lot to learn.
Yeah, there's a shortage. Did you say there was a shortage of bee populations? Swarms, not swarms. What are they called?
Yeah, yes. It's actually, this year's been an unusual year. Every year is different.
Yes.
Every year is different. The best year we ever had was 2018, when everybody got a good crop of honey. This year it's been a bit more difficult because it started well. It looked great. Then the weather went against us.
Yes.
And what happens is the bees multiply in numbers. They go up from maybe 10,000 in a colony to 70 or 80,000 in a colony.
Oh, goodness, really?
Yes. When you get up to that sort of number, you only need a spell of bad weather, and they've all got to be fed, you see. So everything they brought in the good days in the early part of the season disappears again.
So as a beekeeper, do you have to feed them, I guess?
Normally they will feed themselves right through the summer, but if you take the honey off, then you've got to feed them to get them through the winter.
Yeah, okay. Blimey. So you're not sure what sort of honey you're going to get at this point?
Ask me again in 2 weeks' time.
Right. Okay.
Just a little bit too soon to say.
All right. Well, let's fingers crossed you get a good crop. And but I was reading this morning, it was BBC News. I don't know if you saw that article, that they're having all sorts of trouble in the US despite the massive increase in demand for honey. There seems to be very little regulation about where it comes from, and most of it comes in from India, and they mix it with all sorts of impurities, and the production in the US has really fallen because it's not profitable for them to do it. Or
it's very difficult to get uncontaminated honey unless you buy it from a local supplier that you know. Then the chances, if you buy it from Tesco's, they had to withdraw all theirs recently because it was so badly contaminated.
Gosh. And
there's an international honey show which happens every 2 years called Apimondia, where people compete from all over the world for the prize of the best honey in the world. And it was in October last year in Canada. And for the first time, everybody who wanted to put an entry in had to submit 3 jars of honey in July. And they sent it off to a laboratory in Germany for analysis. And they found that 45% of it was contaminated.
What with?
Either with chemicals that the bees had picked up where farmers had been spraying, or people had tried to doctor their own honey to make it look more marketable by putting rice syrup and other things into it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so it was not pure honey.
Gosh.
The Israelis now have actually come up with a way of making synthetic honey.
Have they?
Using enzymes and one thing and another, which is supposed to be okay for vegans.
Oh, all right. That's There's one I hadn't considered. If you don't mind me asking, and primarily I ask this in my role as a financial planner, what was your earliest memory of money? And, you know, sort of good habits or bad habits has that given you in life?
We were desperately hard up when we were first married. I mean, seriously hard up. I remember saying to my dad, "Dad, I'm doing quite well. By the time I'm 30, I should be earning £1,000 a year." And he said, "Well done. That's not bad." When we got married, I was earning £850 a year, and Christine was earning £10 a week. And we bought our first house for £2,400, and the monthly mortgage was £30 a month. And we thought, what are we doing? We can't afford this. This is just ridiculous. This is suicidal financially. But we did. Yeah. And we survived. And we learnt never, ever have any purchases on credit. There was a time in the 60s and 70s when what people called the never, never, and HP was rife.
Really?
Yeah. And you could have anything instantly, a television or a fridge or a washing machine or anything, and then pay it off at some exorbitant rate of interest over quite a long period of time. But my father drummed it into me, if you can't afford it, you don't have it.
So you took that, you didn't take up any of the
I took
credit?
up none of that. I never had any credit at all for anything.
Okay.
We've survived on second-hand goods. We had both our children, and we didn't have a washing machine at all. We used to boil the nappies and hang them out on the line to dry.
I think most people of a certain age will kind of remember that.
They'll kind of remember that.
Twin tub washing machines.
Well, no, we didn't even have one of those. We didn't even have one of those.
Yeah.
So it was a necessity, really, to be extremely careful and watch the pennies, because there was no surplus.
Yeah, interesting.
And I understand how people find it difficult to get through to the end of the month.
Yeah. Do you see? Because I know you're a volunteer for. You do so much stuff, David. You also volunteer for Junior Achievement, don't you?
I do.
Do you see kind of money behaviours coming through from that some suppositions, perhaps? What's been your takeaways from that?
Junior Achiever is a great project.
Yeah.
It does a lot for the children on the Isle of Man.
I know. I want to interview Sue Cook at some point. You'll have to.
Yes.
Introduce me.
Yes. Sue does a fantastic job.
She does indeed.
And she does a wonderful job of funding it, getting sponsorship, organising it, and running a really comprehensive programme. The bit that I'm involved in is the company programme, which is where teams of 6 or 7, 16, 17-year-olds actually form a company, and they have to run it as a company, appoint themselves to finance manager and personnel manager and production manager and operations manager, and they have to have proper board meetings, and they have to produce a product or a service.
Okay.
And they have to produce their accounts, and then at the end of the year they're assessed. They have to make a presentation to a panel of judges as to what they've done and how they've achieved it. They have to present their accounts to be examined and audited. And it's competitive across the island. They have 30-odd teams across the island taking part.
So what's the main objectives of it? Is it to learn the sort of practicalities of running a business, or is it more sort of objective of why would you do stuff?
It's really to give them some idea of the practicalities of running a business.
Okay.
And some insight into what's involved. It's also to encourage them to be able to work together in small teams and to reach agreement, resolve the differences of which they have plenty.
Lots of teamworking.
Lots of teamworking.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I always say to them at the beginning of the year, now, if you want to be seriously rich when you leave school, and I mean seriously rich, you've got to do one of three things. You've either got to be a darn good singer, which seems unlikely. You've either got to be a professional footballer, that seems unlikely, or you've got to run your own business. And if you pay attention over the next 12 months, you'll have some pretty good ideas about what's involved in running a business.
That's a really good way to stage that. What do they say? What's been the... Yeah. Have you learnt anything from it?
You learn a lot from young people.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great being in contact with young people. Their skills, their IT skills leave me speechless. I can't keep up with them anymore. They do everything online, and they do everything on the screen, and everything is social media related and everything, which I find a bit difficult. But I just leave them to get on with that bit of it. But they are extraordinarily good at it, and they do come up with some really good ideas of things to market. One or two of them have actually been picked up in the past by companies who said, that's a great idea, we can make that, turn that into a commercial product. And the kids get a lot out of it.
That's
they
amazing,
do get
isn't
a
it?
lot out of
There's
it.
some great opportunities there.
They learn presentation skills, and they start at the beginning of the year, and they're faffing around all over the place, and by the end of the year they stand up with such confidence and make beautiful presentations with great visuals and everything.
I guess it's because it's something that they care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I do find, I shouldn't say this really, but I do find the way to get a winning team is to get an all-girls team. They work harder than the boys, and they're more conscientious.
Yes, all boys. Take note. Yes. Okay. And so, of all the things you've done throughout your life, then what's given you the most fulfilment from a personal, voluntary, professional basis?
There's so many things, Sharon.
Yeah, there are loads of things.
There's Caring Man, there's Scripture Union, there's the Bees, there's Junior Achiever, which I thoroughly enjoy. A very simple thing that I do now, which I find very satisfying, is that I go into the infant schools once a week just to hear the children read. And it's surprising how interesting it is to sit down and talk to a 6-year-old. And some of them are very chatty, and they tell you all sorts of things.
I bet.
Things that you wouldn't believe. Some of which are probably true and some of which probably aren't. But it is very rewarding. And over the weeks you can see them actually progressing with their reading skills and their communication skills. And
what's the funniest story you've ever heard?
The funniest story? Gosh.
Funniest tale from a 6-year-old?
I usually say to them, how many brothers and sisters have you got? And one little girl thought about that answer for a bit. And first of all she said 2. And then she said, but there's 3 more which live in another house.
Right.
And then she said there's some more that live somewhere else.
Okay.
So I said, that's fair. I said, you're lucky to have all those brothers and sisters. So she said, yeah. She said, I am. She said, I've got 3 daddies.
That's great.
So, oh gosh.
Lovely.
It was just the way she said it.
Yeah.
She was quite pleased with the fact she got 3 daddies.
Well, it depends what it's like at Christmas, I suppose. Oh, great. Mm-hmm. There was just one more thing I wanted to ask you about. Not many people would have realised this, but you went for Maundy money, didn't you?
I did. Yes,
that would have been.
Did.
Was that something that was?
That was a wonderful experience. Yes. Maundy money is what the Queen gives out to very hard up people on the Thursday evening before Good Friday. Maundy Thursday. It's an old tradition which goes back hundreds of years. They used to give away, the sovereign used to give away food and clothes to the poor, and that gradually changed over the years because they found that they weren't really appreciating the food and the clothes, or they were selling it and one thing and another, and it developed into them the sovereign giving away money. Now the Queen gives to 93 men and 93 women, because it's the number of it's the years of the sovereign's age.
Right.
On the Thursday before Good Friday, Maundy coins, which are specially made for the occasion, and you get 93 coins. You also get a new 50p piece, because she has to give you something that you can spend, and a specially minted £5 coin. And it is just a lovely occasion.
So you've met the Queen?
I've met the Queen. I have a picture of myself. bowing to Her Majesty.
Wow.
And that was in Windsor Castle.
That was 2019, was it?
Yes, yes, last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she didn't do it this year for obvious reasons.
Obviously, yeah.
So it may just be that I could be one of the last.
Gosh. Well, let's hope not.
They're little tiny silver coins,
like
specially minted.
Yeah.
And they're lovely. And it's such a great privilege to be nominated to go and receive the Maundy money.
For any existing or even aspiring business owner or entrepreneur, what would be your number one business tip?
I think that the advice I give to my junior achieving team setting up is that they have got to put in the hours and the effort. You can't start a business unless you are absolutely committed to putting the time in and the effort in, and the communication has got to be great. And you must understand cash flow, because businesses are all about cash. Businesses go bust with lots of assets but no cash. So if you understand hard work, communication and cash flow, there's a fair chance you could be successful.
Good. Those are great tips. Thank you. So what do you do to relax? I don't hear much relaxing going on. You're full on all the time. So how do you keep your life in balance then?
I sing with the Isle of Man Choral Society.
All right.
Which is, I thoroughly enjoy that.
Lovely.
That's great.
What voice are you, tenor or?
I'm a bass. Well, I'm a very inferior bass. I can't get down to the bass notes and I can't get up to the tenor notes. So I'm a baritone, so I sing somewhere in the middle. And I'm not very good at it, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And I've always enjoyed singing. But of course, that's all come to a halt for the time being, but hopefully it'll get started up again.
It sounds promising, doesn't it?
So singing is good. I like making things. I'm always making beehives and things for my grandsons and that sort of activity.
There was a car.
It was a Land Rover, yes, which I built for them about 15 years ago, and it had a very hard life. And it's electric, and they drove it all over the place. And they've long since outgrown it, and they were moving house. So I decided to bring it back to the Isle of Man for a refurb. So it's just had a complete refurb, repaint, new tyres, lights, batteries, and all sorts of things. And it's just about to go off to its new home.
Fantastic! I bet it's got a more efficient battery in it as well now.
It has, yes.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yes.
They're very lucky, whoever they're getting it. I've seen it. It's an amazing vehicle. It really is. So tell me, what do you think are the best things about living in the Isle of Man? Because, you've been here for a number of years now and stayed. So what's the best things?
I think it's a very safe place to live. It's probably the safest place in the world. It would be difficult to find anywhere safer. So if safety is your concern, then this is the place to be. I think the fact that we can communicate with the people that matter so easily, if you've got a health problem or a planning issue or a tax problem, you can talk directly to somebody who knows what they're talking about and will identify with you and help you. And I think that's a huge plus for the Isle of Man. Whereas you try and talk to somebody in the tax office in the UK or trying to talk to somebody in the Ministry of Health, it's virtually an impossibility. Yeah. I think it's the size of the structure here where you can actually reach people. I mean, you can even talk to a minister here. You'd never, ever get to do that in the UK.
No,
however big your problem was, you get fobbed off. And I think that's a huge plus in living here, that you can actually get in touch with the decision makers. You may not always agree with them, but at least you can talk to them.
Oh, you can be fobbed off in person.
Indeed, indeed.
I'm surely not. Well, it's interesting. That is very, very true. And I have to say, from our own part of the world, the regulated financial services sector, the direct dialogue that we have with our regulators is really good. You'd never get hands-on, speaking to the FCA in the UK in our field. But here, we even do joint events, consumer confidence.
And people are willing to help and want to give you advice. You're not. They don't give you the impression that you're just a number or a problem. They will actually go out of their way to help.
Yes, good. That's a good point. So what would you say, though, are the main challenges that the Isle of Man faces? I suppose, similarly...
I think
size, as you've mentioned before, about monopolies.
Yeah, it's monopolies. I think that I'm part of the problem of the Isle of Man. We have an ageing population, and I see that as being quite a significant issue in coming years. The island really does need to bring in more younger people. We've got plenty of space over here.
Yeah, we have.
We're not short of room. We're not like the Channel Islands where they're all cramped together. We've got plenty of space, and we need to be working to bring younger people in. I think we have a skills shortage in certain areas too. Maybe not so much now, but certainly before. We had virtually zero unemployment. And those that were on the unemployment register, there's always going to be a residual number there that are there for a variety of reasons. And businesses were experiencing skills shortages, particularly in the gaming industry. They couldn't get the computer skills that they needed. And in other fields, engineering, they can't get the skills that they need. And that is going to restrict the island if the skills aren't here, because it's too easy for some of these, particularly internet-based businesses, to up sticks and just say, well, we can't get our skills here, we'll go to the Cayman or go to Bangalore or we'll go somewhere else. So I think the island has to really focus on providing the skills that employers need.
Yeah, sure, and in the specific sectors in which it needs them. Yeah, okay. Well, what solutions and opportunities can you see then? Well, what would you do if you were a government minister?
What would I do? I think we need to really pull out the stops on selling the island in the UK and in Ireland. So many people are just unaware of what we've got to offer, where we are. You talk to people in the south of England and they have got no idea about the Isle of Man, maybe a little bit more in the north. They just don't know about us. And I was talking to somebody there a few weeks ago, and they said, "Well, where do you get the ferry to from the Isle of Man? Do you get it to Portsmouth? Is it Portsmouth or Southampton?"
Yeah, Isle of Wight, yeah.
And it's just down to all of us to be ambassadors for the island.
It totally is.
And to get the word out there that we have got a lot to offer. We've got a great education system. We've got good health service. I mean, it is a tribute to the island, really, isn't it? That with a population of, 85,000 people, we can have a first-class education system, a very good health service. We've got our own police force, and we do all that with lower taxes than the UK, and no subsidy at all from the UK. They can't do it with 85 million people. They can't. They could learn a lot from looking at the way we do it.
Well, let's hope that somebody's listening and can help implement that. Yeah, so I agree with you. You know, we do all have that role as an ambassador, and in this podcast, in that way, is there to it's designed to be that, that public, that positive voice. It's designed to be a positive voice of of influence. That's the idea behind it. David, what have you got planned next? Well, I mean, you've got so many things on the go. What's the next? What's next for you? New cohort of junior achievement.
No, junior achievement is probably time to retire. I say this every year, and they always say to me, "Oh, go on, we need just do one more year."
They do, at least. They need the introduction. Do you want to? This is the motivator. What's in it for me?
So. But no, I really am getting to the stage where I need to be thinking about doing less rather than more. Although I love my involvement here at St John's Mill.
Yes, of course you're a trustee here too, aren't you?
It's a great place to have an involvement with, and we work together here really well, I feel. The trustees work together, and we need to get the place more on the map than it is somehow. How we get the word out. But we've got great facilities to offer, and we're unique because we're out of town. We've got great car parking. We've got good catering. We've got good meeting facilities with all the latest projection and sound equipment and stuff. And we were going extraordinarily well. We were having a really good year up until COVID shut us down. It's beginning to be some evidence now that it's coming back for the autumn.
Yeah, that's good.
We're beginning to get bookings back.
Yes.
But, and I must say, we have had really good support to get us through this from the Isle of Man government. I think we should be grateful for the support that we've had, with salaries and wages.
With the furlough scheme,
and other support as well. And I think we should pay tribute to the government in the way that they have supported business.
That's good, yes. It was very nimble and timely, and has helped a lot of people survive this.
Yeah,
so.
Well, in normal times, I mean, the civil service are not noted for their speed of action, but in this instance, they've really come up trumps, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. So there's just a few final questions that I ask all our guests, just a few quick questions that people are always interested in the hearing. So what books have you read lately? What books have you read that we'd recommend to listeners? Whether it's just a inspirational, philosophical, or just a good read.
I'm just reading one at the moment. There's a ordained minister in Douglas called Reverend Alex Brown, who you may know is a pioneer minister, and he's been sort of detached from the Church of England to try and do something rather different.
Okay.
And take a different approach to church. And the idea is that people don't go to church anymore.
No, they don't.
So the church has got to go to the people. And that's what Alex is involved in. And he's just written a short book which I'm reading at the moment called, and it's going to be one of a series, Invitation to, I have to confirm the title, Invitation to Divinity or something like that. But it's short, it's concise, it's snappy. And
is it on Amazon?
It was locally published, so it may not be.
Well, send us some details, and we'll put those in the show notes. Okay.
And that's great. But I read all sorts of things. I like Ken Follett and authors who I just can't remember their names.
Tom Clancy's and things like that.
Yeah, I'm not terribly keen on Tom Clancy, but
very good. And what's your favourite quote? Do you have a favourite quote?
A favourite quote? Oh, gosh. Einstein said that 5 years after the demise of the last honeybee, mankind will cease to inhabit the earth.
Did he? That's a really good quote.
And the prediction is that the honeybee, if the current rate of decline in the honeybee population continues, it could be extinct by 2037.
Oh my goodness.
So 2042 could be the year when mankind ceases to be. It's always referred to as an Einstein quote. I think it probably is true, actually.
Do you think COVID has changed that rate of decline any?
Yeah, probably.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
Maybe reverse. That would be too much to hope, but slowed it down a bit anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing? Are you going to send me a list of websites and stuff, and we can?
Yes.
We'll find it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will. But it's for the benefit of our listeners. I'd like to make sure that I've got those details in the show notes so they can reference them and perhaps volunteer or even find out more about things like beekeeping But that's really great. So thanks so much for your help with this project, David. It's been lovely to talk to you today and find out things I didn't know about you. And thank you very much. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you for including me. It's a privilege.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Island Influencers from Thornton Chartered Financial Planners. To find out more and for useful links, visit thorntonfs.com/podcasts.